Welcome to our posts. Today, we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. My act of petty revenge made them send me for a psych eval. I grew up in a really effed up situation. I was diagnosed autistic at a young age. I was adopted and considered a defective product and abused consistently for being so damn weird. At 13, I was given some tests and put into special college courses. My mom beat me for thinking I was better than everyone, so I ran away from home at 14. By 16, I was caught and put in a group home. All the kids in my group home, there were several houses, 2 for boys and 1 for girls, all had to go to the same continuation school. The first day of class, the principal addressed our homeroom and said, "I am here to teach you to speak on complete sentences and use words that have more than 2 syllables." I can't tell you how much that pissed me off. I wanted to tell them to F off. How could you just discount all these kids when you know nothing about them? Most of the kids in the class came from situations as bad as mine, or worse. It doesn't make us stupid. However, I was just tired of having to constantly advocate for myself, so I said F it, and decided to just act like a total airhead. For an entire quarter, I asked the dumbest questions I could think of in class. I made stupid mistakes. I even talked like an airhead instead of my natural, more autistic diction. Think Brennan from Bones. Honestly, it was fun and so much less pressure than trying to excel academically. Ironically, it also made me more popular with the boys. Anyhow, one day we got a creative writing assignment and I was just really inspired. I wrote a parable about a boy who lived in the jungle and befriended an alligator. It was basically an allegory about toxic relationships. I was called into the principal's office for plagiarism. They couldn't believe that I wrote it and wanted to know where I stole it from. I told them they assumed I was an idiot, so I've been acting like one. If they cared to look at any of my transcripts, they would know I'm not an idiot. They were pissed and thought I was psycho, so the group home made me meet with a psychologist for a day of testing. He said I had an IQ of 152 and borderline personality disorder. Later, the diagnosis was changed to autismad with CPTSD. Anyhow, I got to be the first group home kid in Reading to go to the public school in 1992. Edit. You guys have been so kind to me. I want to add something to my story. Years later, I was in a group called Leadership Reading. We were at a teen building camping trip talking about our experiences with Reading. I talked about being the first group home kid to go to public school. I shared about the outrage, how one teacher even introduced me as the group home kid everyone has been upset about. One of the guys in the group was a police officer. He admitted to be one of the people who wrote letters of outrage to the local newspaper. It really changed his heart when he saw how I turned out all those years later. At the time, I was in a leadership role at age 26 at the very same newspaper that had hosted all those angry letters to the editor. I have learned if you walk your life with life grace, integrity, and a determination to prove the mother effers wrong, you can have an amazing life. Next story. I let a toddler shoplift because I hate my boss. I've posted here before on my job. I give customers extra change now and again. This is a new one, though. I had a mother with 4 kids come through my line. The youngest was about 2. She said he could have a candy bar and told him to put it on the belt. I rang everything up. Apparently, the little dude still hasn't internalized object permanence and grabbed the same bar from the display. Mom wasn't watching, but I was. I guess she thought one of the other kids gave the bar to little dude because she picked him up and carried him out, candy bar in hand. He waved by. I waved by back. No one came back later to return the bar or to pay for it. I know because I was there another 4 hours and I didn't see Dink. Corporate treats us like crap so they can afford a missing candy bar. Mom probably didn't notice a second bar either. Next story. Refuse to switch seats, I'll treat you to my melodious voice. So I was going home by bus. I should have taken the train BTW one evening and had the misfortune of finding a seat between 2 people. The way this bus was, one row has 2 seats, aisle, and the other row had 3 seats. I sat in the row between two people, and they recognized each other and started catching up. They went to uni together and hadn't seen each other and all. This was going to be at least a 45 minutes drive given the several stops and traffic. It was uncomfortable for me as they were talking across me, and I just needed some quiet. I know this is public transport and all. So I asked them if they'd like to switch seats, and they both refused. I put on my earphones and tried to shut them out, but I couldn't given that one party had stale breath. I was listening to a song and I decided to sing out loud. Loud enough they couldn't get to hear each other. They stopped talking and I keep quiet. They started talking and I started singing again. Anytime they'd talk I'd sing. It went on for a few minutes and then they stopped talking altogether and I had a smoother ride home. I didn't care if someone would record me. I was just too irritated. Lol. Next story. My brother thought it'd be good to taunt me when I couldn't eat. A few weeks ago I had to get blood tests done, which if you don't know, you can't drink anything other than water or ice for 24 hours. My brother went out of his way to eat things in front of me. Candy bars, my favorite chips, sending me pics of him eating dinner. Keep in mind, he doesn't live with us. He went out of his way to taunt me. But he went to the dentist yesterday for surgery. He can't eat anything but protein shakes and meal replacer milks. I'm buying so many snacks that I know he loves so I can sit in his house and eat them. Nerds clusters, Cheetos, Smile gummies, sunflower seeds, McDonald's burger and fries. I don't even like some of them, but he deserves it. And I will begrudgingly eat my way through gross seeds to watch him suffer further. Suck it, you big crap. I hope you hate your stupid thick milk. Next story. Got my college roommate to move out by watching porn in front of her and her friend. On mobile, so I apologize for any formatting issues. This all took place back when I 31F was a freshman in college. I went to a university out of state and was excited to be out on my own for the first time. There were different styles of dorms, and the older, more janky buildings were geared towards certain specific interests. For example, the dorm I chose to be in was the outdoor adventure dorm, for people who were into stuff like hiking, canoeing, climbing, outdoor adventure type stuff. So I thought it only fair to assume I was going to end up with a roommate who was also into fun adventure type stuff. Boy, was I wrong. On move-in day, I met her for the first time, as well as her mother, and both of them could easily be described as prim, prissy, and had a complete air of snobbery. The mother hated absolutely everything she saw and complained about everything loudly, even saying, "This room is smaller than my walk-in closet at home, and even it's too small." She also picked up a little figurine I had set on my desk, a little Viking guy my mother had given me as a little, "You've got this" type of thing, and called it a cheap piece of crap before letting it drop from her hand back onto the desk and did that little finger flicky thing people do when they touch something dirty. But my roommate wasn't saying or doing much, and having a difficult family myself, I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt and thought, maybe she was raised snobby, but she's trying to break out and get into other things, because I know that I was eager to try new things myself now that I was away from home. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and within the first few weeks she proved to be an absolutely horrible roommate. She would eat my food, smoke in our room, which I could have had to pay a large fine for, was super loud when I would be trying to sleep for my early morning classes, and a bunch of other things you could label as passive-aggressive or just downright rude and disrespectful. I did confront her about my issues with what she was doing, but she would always just shrug me off and say it wasn't a big deal. After a while I had enough and started trying to find ways to make living with me more uncomfortable. It started with little things, such as running to the door and farting really bad when I heard her coming to the room so she would walk into a cloud of stank. But the piece de resistance came when she had a friend over one day, and I got a perfectly depraved idea. Our beds were parallel to each other against opposite walls, standard setup for a shared single-room dorm, and I was sitting on my bed with my back to the wall with my laptop in my lap. And the other two were on roommate's bed talking loudly and generally ignoring my presence. I had a pair of really nice Skullcandy headphones, the kind that when you crank them all the way up can practically be used as speakers, so even when I had them on people could clearly hear whatever I was listening to unless the volume was turned way down. So I cranked the volume and pulled up Pornhub and found a random video of a very loud Asian woman getting railed, and her screaming and moaning was extremely audible through my headphones. I minimized the window so it was playing in the background, and I was just scrolling Facebook with a totally straight face. It took them a second to register what they were hearing, but as soon as they realized what it was, they became visibly uncomfortable. They tried to keep their conversation going, but after just a few minutes they left to go to the friend's dorm instead. 3 days later, she told me she was moving out and getting an off-campus apartment with friends, and I had the room all to myself for the whole rest of the year, which was great because this all happened just 6 weeks after move-in, and I got to enjoy all the advantages of having a room to myself. I got a lot of fun stories out of my college days, but that will always be one of my favorites. Next story. Bought a chore chart to prove a point. So my husband can be childish and overconfident at times, especially when he believes that he is right. To give a better picture, last year my husband and I separated because he was having a midlife crisis, but we are now working through it and are trying to fix our marriage. I work FT and he has been unemployed for the past 8 months. Since the separation, he will point out things that I supposedly have not done or not correctly. I was getting annoyed and told him if he doesn't like what I am not doing, that he could be doing them and that he does. So I bought a chore chart and wrote all the daily, weekly, and month chores on the board and checked off what I had already done for the day. He saw it and got mad, asking what the hell this was. I told him I was doing chores without being asked. Which have you done? He got mad and walked away. Edit. After some consideration and a lot of people jumping straight to divorce, I understand where you are coming from, but I have showed him the messages and we had a strong heart-to-heart. He broke down and we are changing things up. The person who recommended the cards and book, we are starting to use those, and thank you. I will post an update in a few weeks and see if he is holding up. Next story. Neighbor drove out my driveway. This was years ago, actually decades ago. I was 25 when I was able to buy my first house. It meant a lot to me. I was just a laborer, and it took everything I had to pay rent, eat cheap, and save for the down payment. I didn't come from money, nor was I afforded any type of generational wealth. I had to get a conventional loan which had a higher interest rate. Plus, the house had to meet certain requirements in order for the home to qualify for the loan. That means an inspector had to check the property and make an assessment. I met the inspector at the house. I was renting a home just one street over. The inspector showed me the list of things the homeowner had to fix. 2 of the biggest were all electrical outlets needed to have dielectric grease on the connectors. House had aluminum wire, not copper. Long story longer, that helped prevent electrical fires. The other big thing was the soil around the house had to slope away from the foundation. I knew the sellers were not going to fix any of that stuff, and someone else could afford to buy via cash or a different loan mechanism. I asked the homeowner if I could fix those items myself. They had no issues. I spent the next 3 days working non-stop doing exactly what needed to be done. On a Monday, the inspector came out and said the ground sloping away wasn't good enough. I was there with him and told him I did the best I could, and I was the person buying the home and I would do exactly what he wanted, but I first needed to secure the purchase. He looked at everything on the list, and the dirt was the only item that was of issue. He must have took pity on me because I got the loan and stated to move in. The first issue I had was a neighbor across the street and 2 homeowners kept parking in my driveway. Every time I came with a truck, he had his car parked in my driveway. I didn't even know who owned the car. I started to knock on doors. One neighbor pointed me to the guy's house. He would not come to the door. I just as polite as possible, yelling through the door that I need him to move his car because I am moving in. After 10 minutes, nothing, so I went back and no very polite told him his car was now on a tow truck and I was giving him the tow truck company's card on his porch. It was amazing how fast he got to the door then. He opened the door and ran past me only to see his car still parked in my driveway. He turned around and said I lied. I said his car will be towed in about 10 minutes by the company I worked for, Tow Jam. He moved his car right then. I didn't work for a tow company, but it didn't matter. I believe it was a deterrent for him to believe it. Was it petty? I believe so. The next petty thing that took place was between myself and my next-door neighbor. Our driveways were next to each other with a strip of yard that separates the drives as well as the properties. He had a young teenage son that was always working on his POS in their driveway. One day, the kid drives off of his driveway and through my yard and out my driveway. I was a little ticked off. A little later, he returns home and again drives to my driveway across my yard onto his driveway. I walk up to their front door knock, and when the door opens, I'm greeted with the teenager says, "What?" I ask to speak with his dad or mom. He shuts the door and I don't hear anything. I walk back over to my home, get a lawn chair, and sit on their porch. Every 10 minutes I knock on the door. Finally, the kid says they aren't home. I said I'll wait. Another 5 minutes goes by and the dad finally steps out. He is just as a creep as his kid. I tell him what took place and said I don't want it to happen again and actions have consequences. Will it happen again? And now I'm really ticked off. I go and pull up a couple of dead rose bushes and plant them at the corner of my driveway. Go and knock on the door, and when the father figure appears, I walked him out and showed him my beautiful dead rose bushes. He noted that the bushes were dead. I asked him if that was his first house, and he said no. I said this is my first home, and I needed him to respect that. That the rose bushes were a symbol. That I could very easily plant spikes that would puncture tires, not thorns on a beautiful brown rose bush. He looked at me, nodded, and went back inside. I heard yelling, and from then on his kid didn't mess with my property. I want to add that I've been petty my entire life. Countless amounts of planning and being eat up with these types of silliness. After a lot of therapy, and can finally say I'm a lovable, well-adjusted petty M for law. Next story. Insane coincidence ruins a friendship. This is completely true, and the only reason I am posting it is because it actually happened. I know it is insane and many people will challenge it, but it happened, and if I made it up, it would have a better ending. It happened around 1989 in Alabama. I was about 19 and I had two good friends named Brian. I will call them Good Brian and Bad Brian. I was young and stupid and trusting. So when Bad Brian was getting married, he asked me to use my credit card to secure the hotel room. He promised me they would never charge it. I said okay, but was still suspicious, so I transposed some numbers and the expiration date, close enough where I could say it was an accident. He gets married, and no issue. 2 years later, I bought a BB gun off of a mail order catalog, something like GGG Sales. They are not in business anymore, but they used to sell Freon-powered BB guns. What arrives is the wrong item, and I call them and they don't have them in stock, but I can exchange it for anything else in their catalog. It turns out they were like 45 miles away, which was a neighboring state FL. I drive over there and am talking to them, looking at the other things they have, and while I am standing there, a guy answers the phone and starts taking an order, and is saying the name while he is writing it down on the form. It is my name, but with an address much closer to Florida than I live. While he is writing down the credit card info, I walk in front of him and put my driver's license on top of the form. The employee is irritated because he does not realize what I am trying to show him and tries to continue with the order. I point to the name on the license and he stops. I know who it is trying to place an order using my card because I had only given my credit card info to one person. I motion to the man to hand me the phone, and after a little reluctance he does, and I simply say, "Hi Brian. What the hell are you doing?" I could almost hear his mind explode as he recognized my voice. I mean, here it was 2 years later, he decides to use my credit card, and I am in another state in that store at the same time, picking up the phone. Boom. I tell him I am going to stop by his house. His new address was on the order form, and I want the original paper he wrote my info down on, and any copies he had. I stopped by, he handed them to me, and it was everything I could do to keep myself from getting physical. The whole time he had a dazed look on his face, like he did not understand how this happened. I never talked to him again, but have thought of how insane the coincidence was. I just happened to be in the same place at the same time he was using my credit card and was close enough to hear him say my name. Crazy. I know the revenge was petty, but in my mind I left him with a supernatural fear of me, or at least that there is someone always watching. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel our posts.